Hi guys, welcome back to this week's 5y5. George Ellick and Ali Maxwell here to run through 5 players that we find more than interesting on the 5 yards game. George, we thrive where we are most comfortable. And we're lucky that so often in the last few weeks on this show, we've had some expert guests telling us about weird and wonderful players from across different nations and competitions. And we've nodded along and we've asked good questions and we've learned a lot. And to a certain extent, we've fallen in love with some new players that we didn't know much about. But we're back to what we love most this week. An EFL special. 3 super leagues. Get it?
Yeah, this is our domain. This is our pitch. Can't get anybody in here talking to us about EFL players. This is me and you going through what we know. And I guess over the last couple of days, there can't be a football podcast on, the week commencing the 20th of April without mentioning the Super League. And I don't know about you, Ali, but I started to have a bit of an existential crisis when it came to the future of Not Top 20, which is our podcast, because what was it going to look like? Was the EFL even going to exist? Were we going to lose some of our teams to the Premier League? I then got quite excited about the fact that actually, if there were going to be 20 leagues in the Super League, then suddenly Not the Top 20 could be the most fashionable thing in the whole world. But thankfully, we're through that now, and just for the time being, the ESL, I was going to say RIP, but RI something else, and instead we can focus on our favourite leagues, the EFL, where there's plenty of talent, and we are going to enjoy ourselves talking about 5 of them.
Well, George, it hasn't escaped my attention that we get various bits and bobs from those who run 5 yards. We get nice data analysis on who's been bought and sold the most in each week. And this week, it's the trio at the top of the most scouted list that I wanted to flag up, because number 1, perhaps unsurprisingly given recent performances, is Jude Bellingham. Of course, just 1 year ago, playing in the Championship and now starring in the Champions League. And that's why we will continue to bang the drum for young talent, specifically in the EFL, because where there might be some snobbery about just how good players can be if they find themselves in the 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th tier of the English league system, we know from experience how quickly players' fortunes and profiles and the narrative surrounding them can change with a bit of luck and a fair chance. And so it's not to say that we're going to be telling you about the next Jude Bellingham in our 5-a-side EFL team that we're about to run through, but some players to know about, some players to watch, some players that you might hear a lot more about in the future. So you're going to kick us off with the keeper. Who's in nets for our EFL 5-a-side team on this week's 5y5?
It was hard to choose a keeper, so I've gone for the Oxford keeper because there were some other candidates. Simon Sluga, the Luton keeper, who had a very, very poor start at the club and has gone on to progress into one of their key players in recent times. Was one I was thinking about doing. But I think the reason I want to talk about Jack Stephens is because he's, I guess, what 5 yards is about, really, where he is a player who, in 10 years... it wouldn't massively surprise me if Jack Stephens is still an EFL keeper. If he was a League 2 keeper, if he was a League 1 keeper, it wouldn't be a massive shock. It also wouldn't be a massive shock if Jack Stephens is a Premier League keeper, because he is a 22-year-old playing his first full season of EFL football, of first-team football. And we know that young goalkeepers are fairly rare at this level. I think young goalkeepers playing for their parent club is even rarer. We often see young goalkeepers who... are on loan, who are academy players. If you look at the EFL at the moment, you've got Gavin Bazunu, who's had a great season at Rochdale, but currently isn't getting into the team. Ellery Balcombe, who has played in England youth teams, who's at Brentford, who's now on loan at Doncaster, who's not having a very good time of things. But it's rarer that you get a guy who has progressed through an EFL academy. Stephens has had his own loans in non-league at Oxford City, and has kind of held his faith in his own progression at his parent club and has ended up getting the gloves. If you'd have told me at the beginning of the season that Simon Eastwood would be signing a new contract at Oxford despite knowing that he was likely to play second fiddle, then I'd have been pretty surprised. But that's the position that we find ourselves in now. Stephens is up on 5 yards at 6 million, which suggests that the lads, the scouts that have watched him, are expecting his progression to be more down the line of that Premier League move, of getting that move that's going to take his career further. Having watched him play a lot over the back end of last season and this season, I'm not necessarily convinced. And that's not to say that I don't think he's going to be great. I think the parts of his game that are very good are really important parts of being a goalkeeper. For example, his reflexes and his shot stopping are both excellent, and he pulls off saves that have been really important at big times. And he's somebody who, to put it bluntly, I think we've all seen goalkeepers where you kind of wonder what they do. And with Stephens, there have been many occasions where he has saved goals. You know, he is somebody who has saved goals that other keepers wouldn't necessarily have saved, and that is crucial. Physically, he's big enough and he's tall enough to be, you know, the physical specimen that you want to be a top class keeper. I think he's got a lot of filling out to do, which I'm sure Wayne Brown, the Oxford goalkeeping coach, will be aware of and will be part of the plan, because the only reason he came into the Oxford first team this year was because of Eastwood's poor form. I think he's ahead of schedule in that respect. I think they'll need to try and get him to fill out. He isn't necessarily the most dominant when it comes to his, defending his area. Although he can punch well, he does try and claim it, but he's not, given his height, I'd like to see him be a bit more dominant in that role. He's already been linked to moves. He was very strongly linked to a move to Middlesbrough, and I think those links will probably flare up again in the summer.
Is that
Oxford
just
very, very keen?
It's almost automatic, that, isn't it? Like any 21, 22-year-old goalkeeper that's playing minutes, like we know from experience, their names just get chucked around. It's almost like those who do transfer rumours just look at who's playing and who's young, almost.
But and also I think they do often go. Like you look at Bailey Peacock-Farrell, who got a Premier League move on the back of a very, very disappointing spell as Leeds' first team keeper. And he was poor there, and now he's in the Premier League. And I think there's something in that. I think if there's going to be one position where you can probably put a bit of weight in the fact that somebody's got first team minutes, it's being a goalkeeper. You know, you don't play 3/4 of a season in goal for a League One club, age 22, 23, unless you have something about you. And that is the key thing with Stephens, is that I think he is a goalkeeper who definitely has the raw materials to be a very, very good player. And I think he could easily progress to being a class goalkeeper. I just don't think he's ready for that yet. I think his benefit, his potential will be fulfilled if he does stay at Oxford and carries on playing. If he keeps his shirt, because Eastwood, as I say, signed a new contract. And testament to the club as well, that they are a team at the moment who seem to be intent on proving my opinions wrong on young players. You know, Josh Ruffles was a player who, as a centre midfielder, I didn't think was good enough. I thought he was a makeshift left back. He's been fantastic this season. Sam Long, I never thought would be a League One player. He's now probably Oxford's most important player as it stands. Wow. Stephens, you know, when he first came in, I didn't necessarily think he was going to play a great deal, and he hasn't looked like he's going to give up the gloves ever since he came in. So credit to them and credit to the coaching staff. 6 million, I wouldn't be buying Jack Stephens at 6 million, but I wouldn't put off people who know more about goalkeeping, know how quickly this progression could happen. I think that he's a guy who could go on to great things.
Interesting. Okay, well, next up, I'm going for one of the youngest players to appear in the Championship this season, and it's just over the last few weeks where Norwich, having 2 injuries at the heart of their defence to Gibson and to Zimmerman, have turned to the boy. I was going to say the man, the boy really, 18-year-old Andrew Omobamidele, who they had decided was good enough, if called upon, if needed, to be their 4th choice centre-back. Now, that shouldn't be sniffed at, given that Norwich are a side in Championship terms with enough resources to have a very deep squad, like some of their rivals, and who I think pretty easily could have got a senior 4th centre-back, put it that way. The sort of person who would be happy to be, well, 3rd, 4th fiddle in that position, but also someone who, you know, you could be confident could step in with experience behind them at the level. That's not what Omobamidele has. He's 18 years old, Irish, another young Irishman at Norwich, like Adam Eder, the striker, who's a couple of years older, who both Canaries fans and Republic of Ireland fans are and should be very, very, very excited about. The sort of quality talent, I think, at this age, and of course nothing's guaranteed when you're 18 or even when you're 20, but the sort of talent I would suggest that Irish football fans probably haven't had in some time, really, in terms of a crop coming through. That includes Someone like Troy Parrott as well at Tottenham, who's very highly rated, but who's had a tough first year out on loan with Millwall and now with Ipswich. Omobamidele's played the last 5 games, or rather started the last 5 games for for Norwich. Certainly not for Ipswich, for Norwich. And obviously in that time, they drew 1-1 with Preston. It was his first start. He was named man of the match. He was excellent, showed great composure. You do sometimes think that, an 18-year-old playing his first game is always a bit of a shoe-in to win man of the match, especially if it's a fan vote. There's just a sort of, there's a niceness, isn't there? There's a desire to be nice and kind to the youngster, but he did play very well and was a bit unlucky when Preston's equaliser went through his legs. He then played in 2 wins to nil, 7-0 against Huddersfield, 1-0 against Derby. Pretty untested against Huddersfield, but Norwich's backline were under the cosh against Derby, and Omobamidele played very, very well in that game. In the last 2 games against Bournemouth and Watford, they've had a tough time. They've lost both games. They've conceded 4 goals in total. Of course, their promotion was confirmed before that Bournemouth game, so you can understand the slippage in standards from a team perspective. And actually, just looking at the goals, there's not too many of them that Omobamidele would be considered glaringly at fault for. Probably 1 or 2 occasions where, if you're being hypercritical, you would have wanted him to sort his feet out a little quicker, to react a little quicker when the ball was fizzing around the box, certainly for Gosling's goal and for one of Bournemouth's goals as well. But on the positive side, you can see why Norwich trusted him. You can see why people are so excited about him because, well, firstly, the composure, the maturity that he shows. Centre-back is a position where if you don't have composure, anticipation, those sorts of more mental instincts, you'll get caught out pretty quickly in the Championship if you make rash decisions. And you'll certainly stand out in a back line that is so solid with someone like Grant Hanley next to you. So that's pretty exciting. The defensive instincts look like they're there. His size and physicality for his age are very, very impressive. He doesn't necessarily stand out next to Hanley, but when you consider he's only 18, something to work with, I think, for sure. And clearly at Norwich, he's going to be developed to be a ball player. The onus and pressure is going to be on him if he's playing for Norwich to be the one to make forward passes into the central midfielders or out wide to the fullbacks or wide players. So it's an interesting one in 5 yards terms. He's 17 million, or rather he's going up this week at 17 million. And for me, it felt a little high when I first saw, just because this is someone that's only played 5 games or started 5 games for the club. But you can understand why. Like, the upside here is huge. I'm just a little put off because I feel like it's high risk as well. And that is what the game is all about, of course. The reason his price will be high is performance pay is 5 yards is estimate of his, value is 5 yards is estimate of his future performance pay. So with potentially 15 years ahead of him, he could, of course, earn a lot of performance pay if he plays at the very top of the game. Far more than 17 million over a 15-year career. I just think that it's not one to get overexcited about just based on the last few weeks, because realistically, even if I'm excited about his potential, it seems unlikely he'll play minutes in the Premier League next season, barring defensive disaster in terms of injuries. I mean, Norwich might go into it with him as their 4th choice again. I would be surprised, just because I feel like they'll be slightly burned from last time, where inexperience in the back line really came back to bite them. So you're kind of betting, if you buy into Omobamidele, that Norwich have really clear plans for his development and pathway. And I think that would be right. Everything out of the top of the club suggests that for each individual player, they do have very clear plans. And so maybe you trust in that. And maybe you think that even if over the next year or 2, he won't be playing in the Premier League, maybe they'll pick the right loan for him. Maybe he'll just be better served developing at Norwich, even if he's not playing first team football. But the upside is obvious. Like, a huge amount of the top defenders in the Premier League came through the Championship. Could you have, if you buy into Omobamidele, the next Ben White, or even Konza, or Rodon, or Ben Godfrey, of course, who came from Norwich, is now at Everton, or best case, Joe Gomez? Could you have the next one of those on your hands? All of those players are between 19 and 37 million on 5 yards. Gomez, that very top level, at 37 million. So, I mean, if you do believe in his qualities, his potential, and that Norwich have the right plans for him, well, maybe that is of interest. But, in 5 years' time, he could be well in that range in terms of value, and you'd have got in at the very low end. But I just worry that there's so much that can happen even in the next 5 years before this player turns 23. So much uncertainty and bad luck and poor decisions on behalf of him or his representatives or the club. And that's just what's holding me back a little bit. I'm excited about him. I've been enjoying watching him play. He's a great one to have on 5 yards because he really sums up what the platform, what the game's all about. So I'd love to see some scouting reports of Omobamidele once he goes up this week. For me, it's just one to watch. But for you guys, it could be something interesting for sure at 17 million. So that's our defender in our five-a-side. George, who's next?
Next is the player that I'm going to try and emulate in my own game of five-a-side, kicking off in 2 hours and 30 minutes. He is a player who we spoke about, well, actually you spoke about on Sky a couple of months ago, because I was meant to be talking about him and came down with an illness literally about 3 hours before, so I had to miss, and you were lumbered with having to speak about a guy that I'd prepared to talk about. He is somebody, and I've said it on the podcast, on the Not Sort 20 before, just go and watch a bit of Elliot Watt at Bradford. Just if you can get on Scout or get on Instat, or if you can just find some clips of this guy, just go and have a look, because there's something quite special about him. And we had Paul Riley on Not the Top 20 a couple of weeks ago, and it was so funny watching his face when he spoke about exactly the same experience that I experienced, where he went and scouted Watt for work purposes and came away just saying, I absolutely love him. He's a centre midfielder who, if you look at his his history, his past, where he came through, it's not a massive surprise that he is quality for League Two level. He was recruited into the Liverpool academy and basically only left Liverpool because he was homesick from his hometown of Preston. And what I quite like is he went from Liverpool to Blackburn and then to Preston, almost as if like even Blackburn was too far. Like he just had to be, he had to be home before being snapped up by Wolves, who of course have a pretty strong history in terms of academy development and youth team recruitment. He was pretty well thought of at Wolves as well. He played in the Toulon tournament back in 2018, ages 18. He was somebody who I think a lot was expected of, and for whatever reason, he never really got a chance at Wolves, despite being involved in some Carabao Cup squads. And he went on loan last season to Carlisle and did okay before leaving Wolves and moving on to Bradford in the summer. Now, Bradford have had quite a weird season. Stuart McCall, the manager, leaving about halfway through after a really disappointing start to the campaign. Connor Sellers and Mark Truman taking caretaker charge, going on a ridiculous run, getting, as always seems to be the case, getting the job full time, and then since then it hasn't been too good, and the club doesn't look like to be in a great position for next season. But none of that has anything to do with Watt. He's a holding midfielder, but in the mould of your kind of your Fabregas rather than your defensive midfielder. He's somebody who sits in front of the four, whose passing range is just so great. Proper. I'm trying to, having seen people rallying against the term quarterback in football, I'm trying not to say that, but he is that kind of player who gets the ball, looks up, is happy to switch it, is happy to play balls over the top, is happy to look for the men wide, and has a physicality that goes alongside this that you don't normally get from these players, because this is a role that's basically normally employed by players whose legs have maybe gone, who retain that passing ability. We compared him to Ben Whiteman on you did, on Sky.
Thank you.
Which I think is a fairer comparison than maybe Fabregas, but I'm trying to get that style of football across here. And given that he's got that kind of academy upbringing, given that he's got this technical ability as well, he's somebody who, if I could text Carl Robinson, Oxford manager, one player that I'd want us to sign in the summer who's kind of realistic in League Two, it would be him, without question. He's a proper blank canvas, and somebody who's maybe gone under the radar a little bit because of Bradford's underwhelming season. And I reckon a fair few Bradford fans will probably listen to me saying this and think, hold on, he tries too many Hollywood balls, he gives the ball away the whole time. I'm not having it at all. I think he's class. He's not up on 5 yards yet. He's going up as part of the intake on Friday. And I've been told by the powers that be that he is going up between 4.5 and 5 million. Now, again, that is pretty high for a League Two centre midfielder, and that would suggest to me that whichever smart brain has been scouting Elliot Watt has maybe seen what I've seen, has maybe seen what Paul Riley saw, and I think I would still be a buyer I've got a feeling this guy is going to go very, very far. And again, because he's scored a couple of goals this season, he's got a couple of assists. I think playing in the right team, he is somebody who will do that. And if you watch his goals, all of them a brilliant breaks through midfield. They're kind of Lampard-esque, I guess, kind of getting onto the end of balls on the edge of the box. He's not somebody who's just going to be that crab, kind of just on the halfway line, shifting the ball. I love him. I'm a huge fan. Excited he's going up on 5 yards, and he would be, he's the man I'm going to be thinking about this evening on the football pitch. When I get the ball into feet and I have to shift it across quickly, it's all about Elliot Watt tonight.
I'm going to be writing a scout report of you on 5 yards, shades of Elliot Watt, Ben Whiteman, Cesc Fabregas,
And Frank Lampard.
and Frank Lampard. Do you know what? If there's a player that I would like to compare myself, but can't, sadly, because it just doesn't work in any way, it probably is Arnaut Danjuma in the EFL. He is basically... I'm just so passionate about Danjuma at the moment. It's actually getting a little bit embarrassing, and it's started to become... I've seen a few people tweeting, being like, wow, Ali Maxwell really likes Arnaut Danjuma. Like, what's going on there?
Did they full name you?
Is there anything? Well, it's my Twitter handle, isn't it? Ali Maxwell _, really likes Arnaut Danjuma. And you know what? If I'm Ali Maxwell _, this is Danjuma overscoring, which is a horrendous pun, but he is overscoring his expected goals, and that is a red flag when it comes to Danjuma. I spoke to Tom Warville about him the other day, and even though I'm so blinded by his skill and quality, Tom did remind me that 16 goals from 8 expected goals. Let's not get too carried away about how that could translate up at the very top level. But aside from that, some of the stuff Danjuma's done in the Championship over the last few weeks is insane. His highlights reel is up there with Buendia's this season, and better than Sarr's, I would say. Comfortably, I would say a Danjuma highlight reel, his goals and assists, I think would look better than Ismaila Sarr's this season. And that is saying a lot because Sarr's been excellent for Watford. Danjuma's actually ranked first for non-penalty goals and assists per 90 in the Championship this season. If it wasn't for an injury, his numbers would be gaudy. They'd be insane. But he's only played 30 games because of an injury in the middle of the season. But just watch his highlights. See what he did against Norwich on the weekend, and you'll see why I love him so much. I mean, his quality in the final third is undeniable by this point. And it's not Championship level. It's top tier Premier League level for me. And maybe that's not surprising because of where he came from. Danjuma started thriving in Holland, got a move to Genk in Belgium, played Champions League football for Genk, scored a 30-yard screamer against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, age 20. Like, at that point, if you'd have said 4 years down the line or 3 or 4 years down the line he'd be playing in the Championship, you'd have been completely baffled. But it's a reminder that development's not linear. Luck and decision-making plays a huge part. And this is a mixture of the two combining or conspiring against him. Choosing Bournemouth to join at the time where he did, I'm sure there'd be people with hindsight saying like, oh, that was a dodgy move. I can completely understand it, to be honest. The Bournemouth relegation was obviously kind of out of the blue. I'm sure they wouldn't have been favourites for relegation that season. For Danjuma, it felt like a team that would get the best out of his qualities in the final third, allow him to announce himself on the Premier League stage, and would increase Bournemouth's own attacking output. But he missed most of the season where they got relegated, and he basically came back to fitness after COVID, and Bournemouth were in the Championship. Took him a while to get going, but for me, he's right up there with Buendia as the best player in the league in the final third. And when the ball gets played out left and Danjuma gets it under control and faces up the right back, that's basically the most exciting moment for me that can happen in Championship football, apart from maybe Buendia receiving it between the lines from Ollie Skip for Norwich. Now, I think Danjuma, we don't know if Bournemouth will go up this summer. I'm sure if they do, they will try to keep him. If they don't win the playoffs, he has to move, and any club in that tier below the top 6 in the Premier League should be all over him, whether it's Everton or Aston Villa, Leeds, Southampton. Everyone should be bidding for Danjuma. I guess the drawbacks from a 5 yards point of view, he's only 17 million, and I think this is astonishing. The drawback is, what if he moves to a Dutch club? What if he moved to PSV? That's a non-PP league, so you would suddenly lose a lot.
It would be a massive move for him as well.
Well, exactly.
That would probably be the dream move, to be honest.
Quite possibly. So that is a huge red flag when it comes to this. If he moved to another league with smaller PP returns or none at all to the Premier League, of course his potential to earn performance pay is reduced. Also, he's got a checkered injury history. Like, he played quite a lot of minutes before he turned 21, but then he had 2 full seasons without much football. And he hasn't got much mileage on his body. That's what I'd say almost as a positive. He's around the same age as Buendia, but he's probably played just over half the minutes of Buendia at senior level in his career. So I think he's got plenty to offer. I don't see him age 24 and think like, oh, he's only got a couple of years left. Not at all. I think his best years are ahead of him. So for me, George, this is what 5 yards is all about. There's a mixture of like the emotional here because he's just one of those players that captures my imagination that I love to watch. But I actually think in 5 yards terms, I'm just all in. I've bought in today before the recording, and I can't wait to be along for the journey. In championship terms, okay, Danjuma, 17 million. He's 24 years old. Ismail Assar, I think he's 23, 33 million, twice the price of Danjuma. Buendia, same age, 11 million more. And Burmo, who's 2 or 3 years younger, but is he anything like this kind of player? Not for me. 11 million more. Even David Brooks, Danjuma's teammate, is 4 million more. I think he's a year younger than Danjuma. Like, I know Brooks is popular, and I know that at his best, he is a special, special player. But right now, I'm picking Danjuma every day of the week over Brooks in terms of their careers from this point onwards. So I'm all in. Hopefully, I don't need to say too much more. I just think at 17 million, it's like, I don't know what the scouts of 5 yards are doing. Maybe they've been sleeping on him. Maybe they don't like him as much as I do. But he's not going to be playing in the championship next season. I'm pretty confident of that. I think he'll be earning PP, and he's a goal scorer and an assister. Like, that's what he does. He's a PP machine.
This is the first time I've ever, and we've been doing this for quite a long time now, mate. This is the first time I've ever sat on 5x5 with you and thought to myself, is it unprofessional if I just get on right now?
Well, if you've seen...
unprofessional if I just get on 5 yards during recording and just get on?
You must be full of regrets. If you'd seen my squad and my profit over the last few months, you'd be a bit...
No.
You'd be kicking yourself that you don't do that more often.
I'm saying, is it about to get on now? Like, as in whilst I'm recording?
No. I think you should do it.
Fine.
I think you should do it.
Right. Apologies then for the way this is going to go, talking about Jonson Clarke-Harris. If I'm busy logging into my 5 yards account and depositing all the while. I'll delay for 5 minutes. Jonson Clarke-Harris playing up front for our EFL 5-a-side team. And he's another one where I am a little bit surprised by the price. This is the one where, 3.5 million. He's 26 years old. He scored 28 goals in League One. Peterborough's model for buying and selling strikers is well established. I don't think no matter what Darren McAntony might say in the next couple of weeks, they have a value for Jonson Clarke-Harris. If somebody bids that value, they're going to sell him and they're going to reinvest that in somebody else. He is just an out-and-out goal scorer. He's somebody who, over the last 2.5 years now in League One, has done it consistently. I think, even though he is not in the same league as Ivan Toney, I think the Ivan Toney story will make some lazy clubs look at Clarke-Harris as being a very attractive option, because the notion that League One goals don't translate into Championship goals, at least for now, that myth is busted. If that makes sense, that is something that doesn't make sense, and especially when you consider the way that Brentford looked to replace Watkins with Toney. I kind of feel like the same thing will happen here, where a lot of Championship clubs will be alerted to the fact that Clarke-Harris is probably available, and if he were to do similar things to Toney, who's now being linked to a £35 million move. They're not dissimilar ages. Toney just a couple of years, I think a year or two younger than Clarke-Harris. Then they could be quids in as well. He's a goal scorer who can score any type of goal. He's left-footed, but is proficient with both feet in the box. He scores headers. A proper out-and-out goal scorer too. There is a very high chance that Peterborough are going to be in the Championship next season. In which case, immediately that value should be bumped up. But I still think there is a chance that he will leave no matter what happens for the upcoming campaign. And 3.5, when you consider that Jack Stevens is a goalkeeper who's not going to be scoring any goals or getting any assists, and he's only 3 or 4 years younger, and he's more expensive. I think that's wrong. I think this is a very, very low risk play on a guy he's born to make PP because he's born to score goals. I think this is a no-brainer. Sorry, I promise I wasn't getting on whilst I was talking there, but it may have sounded like I was. It's just a pretty simple, he is the best that League One's got to offer, and I don't think that's reflected in his 5 yards price.
Okay, well, there's our 5x5 EFL 5-a-side. That was Jack Stevens, Andrew Omobamidele, Elliot Watt, Arnaut Danjuma, and Jonson Clarke-Harris. Do tweet us on the 5 Yards account if there are any other EFL players that you want some opinions on. But you guys have got your own opinions, and I know that a lot of you are watching a lot of EFL football just like George and I. Writing scout reports on 5 Yards is such a good way to put down your thoughts, really, isn't it?
Yeah, just interestingly, this shows this is a show that is fast moving. The pace of 5 Yards. Just got a message from 5 Yards HQ, lads. Elliot Watt's going up at 7 million. Oh. Scouts are very, very bullish on him. So,
but that's a shame, isn't it? We want what I think is the case with Danjuma, which is that we think they're wrong and we think we're right, but actually they're kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, at least
exactly.
Even if you don't buy him, somebody hopefully out there listening and watching this will now go and check out Elliot Watt and get quite excited.
But that's why the value is so important, isn't it? And whenever we talk on this show, that's why we're not just going all in, suggesting buys or even buying into these players ourselves. Because, of course, 5 Yards, buying and selling players, there's the chance to lose money just as much as there is the chance to make money. And the value is crucial there in terms of whether you win or lose ultimately on 5 Yards. So, that's good to know about what one that I'll just have to watch from afar, but I won't be financially invested in. This has been 5x5. Thank you so much for watching this week, guys. If you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast feed, give it a share if you've enjoyed it. The 5 Yards social media accounts will be posting this, and you can share the link till your heart's content. Make sure you join us next week as well. No doubt we'll have a special guest on to take us to some far-flung country, some far-flung footballing competition. Join us again next week on the 5x5.